I am Kathryn Kidder. Today is July 8th, 2020. I'm here with Mary Martsolf. Mary, would you please say and spell your full name, including maiden name?
Mary Martsolf. The last name is Martsolf.
And your maiden name?
Leitch. Leach.
Thank you. We are here to talk about the Agricultural Women's Club at the University of Florida, which was founded in 1908 and disbanded this year in 2020. And we'll be talking about your membership and your experiences with that group. But I'd like to start with some of your personal history. Can you tell me where and when you were born?
Martins Ferry, Ohio, in February 26, 1931.
Were you born in a hospital or at home?
Yes.
In a hospital?
In a hospital.
Uh-huh. Okay. And what were your parents' names?
James K., Leitch, and Helen K. Leach.
Okay. And were they from that area in Ohio?
He was a minister at a little United Presbyterian Church there, and she was his wife. He had just graduated from seminary a couple of years before and was a preacher there.
And what was your mother's maiden name?
Kyle, Kyle.
Mm-hmm. So were your grandparents from that area?
No, they were from Altoona, Pennsylvania, where they were then.
Where was that?
Altoona, Pennsylvania.
Oh, Altoona, okay. And is Ohio where you spent most of your childhood?
I was there till I was 11, and then we moved to Pennsylvania, Indiana, Pennsylvania. My father took a church there.
What do you remember about your first home?
My first home?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was in Steubenville, Pennsylvania. We moved there from Martins Ferry when I was, I think, 2.5. So I don't really remember that. But the first home was interesting. It was, Steubenville was divided into the part down by the river and then the hill on top. And we were on top. And I do remember things like the Depression. And since we were living by the church, next door to the church, we used to get vagrants all the time who came starving. And I remember my mother always fed them, but she never fed them in the house, which always surprised me. But she fed them on the porch steps or porch. And when I got older, I figured out why she probably did that. But that was interesting. It was interesting being a preacher's kid. We used to play all around the church, all outside the church. It was fun.
Did you have friends that were accompanying you in the playing around the church?
Well, yes, and kind of cops and robbers, and friends, and my brother, who was 2.5 years older, and then my sister came along 6 years later. I guess we let her play. I don't remember that. I remember he wanted her to be a boy, and he went and hid under the bed for 2 days because he didn't want a girl. He had enough of me.
So did you go to a preschool or any kind of before elementary school?
I started kindergarten when I was 4 in the public school there. And that we were allowed to do that in Ohio. In Pennsylvania, when I moved there, I was probably a year younger than everybody in my class, and in several cases, more than a year younger than people in my class, because I started so early.
Was that any kind of problem for you?
Well, it wasn't at the time. as I look back on it, there's one thing I couldn't do in kindergarten. They were all doing the picture of little three bears, and they were doing steps, and I could not do steps. I could not figure out how you went up and over. And I thought, well, that must have been immaturity, because I could not. I mean, it certainly wasn't brains. So I don't know.
And your school years, were they also in the same place? No, you said they moved by the time you got into elementary school, right?
Yeah, I moved. I just started junior high, and we moved then I went to the laboratory school with the Indiana University of Pennsylvania's laboratory school, where they trained their teachers and trained me. And I went there till 10th grade, and then I went to high school for 2 years. And then I went there to college too, Indiana. So.
When you were growing up, you said it was Depression times, and was that a hardship for you in a preacher's family?
Well, we never had much money. I mean, we had a parishioner whose wife was the wife of one of the governors of Pennsylvania. She always gave us a nice turkey at Thanksgiving time, so that was good. But we never had very much money. But we had a parsonage. We had fun.
What do you remember about holiday times, Christmas and so on?
Holiday time. One thing I remember, my parents never did the tree ahead of time. They always did. Christmas morning we got up and it was there. And then New Year's Day it came down, come hell or high water. And sometimes it felt like that. Sometimes because it was a lot of, everybody else had theirs for 2 weeks and we had ours like 1 week. But it was fun.
So you said you went on to college there. So was education a priority in your family?
Oh, yes. My mother and dad both graduated from college, and they met at Muskingum College in New Concord, Ohio. My dad used to tell the story that he was John Glenn's roommate. John Glenn's family lived there, which, of course, is absurd because he was way older. But the story was that Daddy went down the street one day and Mrs. Glenn was out, and he said they had just built a home, and he said, "Do you have room to rent to a college student?" And she said, "Yes, we do." So he roomed there, and little John loved Daddy. So he was occasionally allowed to sleep in his bedroom. So they were roommates from time to time. So.
Amazing.
Yeah. But it was a good story.
So you ended up going into a teacher training program. Was that your goal when you were in school? Or what did you envision as your future?
I wanted to be an English teacher because I loved my English teacher, one of them. And he said, well, there's no point in doing that because you're not going to get a job. There are no jobs for English teachers, which turned out not to be true in my whole life. And so I took home ec and English, dual major, which is a very strange dual major. And I thought afterwards, I got exempt from so many English classes that I'm not sure I learned all those things. I mean, it might have been better to take the class. Anyway, so I graduated from there and taught in that high school where I had gone to high school. So.
And what was that like? Any issues about that?
To see all those ancient teachers who were my contemporaries, more or less. And I started out in home ec taught a tailoring class at night, which I still amazed that I did, but I did. Taught them how to make sport coats and stuff, and I kept thinking, "Ye gods, do I even know this?" But I guess I did.
So the curriculum in those days for home ec was what?
Oh, we had the sewing lab and the food lab, and we had it was kind of like it was until fairly recently. We didn't teach things like household accounts and stuff. We didn't have any babies to carry around to prove, how hard it would be to have a baby. We didn't have that kind of thing. We just had the basics, the real old home ec.
And how long did you do that?
Well, I did that for only a year, and then I moved to Pittsburgh to I moved to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to work for the natural gas company, People's Natural Gas Company. And I often think when I see everybody on TV, the home shows, they all want gas. And I thought, man, back in that times, they didn't all want gas. We kept saying, oh, gas is much better, but nobody much believed that. They thought electricity was good. We used to go out to the schools and do demonstrations, and there were three of us, well, two of us and an assistant. And that was interesting.
And that went on for several years?
No, only a year, because I got engaged along there, and I couldn't be married in that job. And so I moved to Martinsburg, Pennsylvania, and was married that fall. And then we both taught there for a number of years in Pennsylvania, Martinsburg. And then my husband had written an article for an English journal, and somebody came to the door one day and knocked on the door and said, I really want you to come to State College, Pennsylvania. He said, I love this article, and that's exactly what I want in my faculty, and I want you to come. So we built a house there, which we adored, and it was 5 years old. But we went to State College, Pennsylvania, and he taught there, and I taught there. And then we adopted our two children there. Found out later that had we stayed in little bitty Martinsburg with 1,400 people, we could never have had the children, because they told me that the children were basically born in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, and they were parceled out to Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. They were not parceled out to the middle of the state. So we were able to adopt two children there. And then I substituted. Then my first husband died when he was 52. And I took his job about 2 weeks after he died and taught there in the English department in the high school. And then I remarried a year or so later. And my husband was a professor at Penn State, and he saw no reason whatsoever to leave Penn State until he decided to come to Florida. And he thought he really needed to come to the University of Florida. So I moved two kids who were high school seniors. Oh, that was hard. They didn't care for that. But I figured they'd be better off. I had moved when we were I was in high school. No, I was in college. And I'd meet people, and they'd say, oh, you went to such and such high school. I said, no, I don't know anybody here. I was in Pittsburgh then. And I said, I don't know anybody here. And I thought, well, at least if I move them when they're seniors, they'll know people here, which they did. And it worked out.
You mentioned earlier that you couldn't be married in the gas company job. What was the problem with that?
The rules of the company. They only wanted single women.
Was that a standard sort of thing at that time in that area that you know of?
I guess so. I don't know. It was through our company. I did enjoy Johnstown. I lived at the top of the inclined plane. Well, not at the exact top, but up on the hill there. And I came down every day on the inclined plane to work right at the bottom of the inclined plane. And that was interesting.
So that brings you to Gainesville and the
University of Florida, you're right.
eventually you got here. And what was your first acquaintance with the Agricultural Women's Club?
Oh, I think I probably went to a welcome party in the fall. We used to have those. We had them for a long time. And nobody else in my department, the wives in my department, were in Ag Women. And I thought, well, I should be in Ag Women, support the department, if only that. And so I joined Ag Women. Became the secretary along the way, which suited me fine. And then whoever the nominating committee was, they said, we can find a secretary. We cannot find a treasurer. And I said, I can barely add. I am not a treasurer. I said, that's not going to work. And they said, well, we have to have a treasurer. And I said, all right, I'll be the treasurer. And to my surprise, I ended up putting the books on spreadsheet and doing them that way. And I'm still surprised at that. I couldn't redo it. But it was fun. And the Agriculture Women's Club was very active, very friendly, was nice. We did a lot of good with our scholarships.
What year are we talking about when you moved to Gainesville and began that association?
Oh, 1980.
80?
79, 80, yeah.
Okay. So you were a member for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And very rapidly on the board.
Yeah.
So were you involved in planning these good times that you mentioned?
Sure. Yes. Yes, it was a very active steering committee, yeah, officers. It got to the point, and that's kind of funny, and I don't know when it was, but I don't know, half a dozen years before we dissolved, went into retirement as a club. Nobody wanted to be an officer, nobody at all. So finally we said, all right, we'll just keep doing it. We have a good time together. We have lunch and we have meetings, and we'll keep doing it. So we got to this awkward position when it came time in the spring to announce our nominations. We announced ourselves and told them why, and they all agreed they didn't want to do it. So they just kept reelecting us, and so that's how we ended up being the officers for quite a while. Of course, then I got to know a lot of those people really well and really enjoyed them. And Deanne Connor was absolutely the best president one could possibly have had. I mean, she was. And she still is right on top of everything. She remembers lots of things I don't. And you had to do it right when you were working with Deanne. You know, I had to do everything properly. That all the lunches had to be perfect, and the dinners. And
who were the members of the club when you came in? Were they faculty wives or faculty or who?
Wives. We only ever had a couple of faculty members, female faculty members. And as we progressed through the years, we would have those open houses for new members of the staff, their wives. But they came with jobs after a while, and they didn't have an interest in us at all. And somebody told me the other day that one of our members had an opening tea. Not a single soul came to it. That from new wives, it was just the officers. And it began to be something that people didn't do. You know, they went into jobs immediately, which was sad.
In contrast with that, non-attended tea. What was that first? What do you remember about the first open house that you went to, or the welcome party? What was served, or what was the ambiance and or activity of that?
Too long ago, Kathy.
No recollection of that. No good or bad experiences stick out.
Too long ago.
What about other activities? What favorite activity do you remember?
Well, my husband was very busy in research and teaching, and so I had lots of time to do things. And I wasn't working, and I got right away into the auxiliary of the hospital, partly because I had tended my first husband in the hospital months and months and months and back and forth. And I thought, oh, I can't even stand to go in a hospital. It makes me sick at my stomach. I've got to go in, I've got to do that. I might end up in the hospital, or my kids will, or something. So I joined the auxiliary right after I came here. And they wanted to know what I wanted to do. And I said, well, something not into the hospital. So I worked at the telemed, which was right behind the information desk in the front lobby. And one day I was up on one of the floors doing something or other, and I thought, oh, ye gods, I'm in the hospital. I'm up here with all these smells, and it's fine. So that worked. And I ended up being membership chairman and president and did all that. And then I was the founding president of Hospice Alliance, and worked a lot with Hospice Alliance. And so between Ag Women and Hospice Alliance and the auxiliary, I was kind of busy.
Would you describe a bit about what you did with the Hospice Alliance?
Well, they had two groups. In fact, for a while, they didn't think they wanted an auxiliary, and they wanted they had volunteers that helped with patients, and we were certainly not that. Although we could be that, we could do that too. But they had they wanted a group that would fundraise or do activities or spread the word or something, and we did that. So we had a lot of events for them, earned a lot of money for them, with the style show and silent auction and decorator show houses and spring fling, which was a fashion show from we collected the best clothes from the hospice attic. We started the hospice attic. We collected the best clothes from there and sold them at the spring fling. Of course, my closet has a lot of those clothes in it. That's part of my wardrobe. And
what was Hospice Attic?
Hospice Attic?
Mm-hmm.
We started it on 13th Street behind Ward's. And we collected used clothing, used items, household items, and sold those. And then we completely outgrew that location, went down on 8th Avenue where it is now. And then a lot of our Lions things were there too. We had Christmas things for the children and an antique show and stuff like that.
What prompted you to get so involved in these community affairs, not just the social club that the Ag Women's group was, but
I don't know. The people were fun. The activities were worthwhile. I drafted Deanne to be president of the auxiliary, and then I drafted Nancy Ingram to be president of not the auxiliary, the alliance. So that was some overlap from the hospital to the hospice.
What did you have to do to manage these outside activities in your household? And for a while you had your children with you.
Well, of course, they were older and could take care of themselves. And I don't know, I just did what needed to be done. But I never did teach again. Partly because my husband went on trips, conferences and things. And he wanted me to go with him, so I was able to do that if I didn't tie myself down to a job. If I tied myself down to a job, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So it worked out.
How did you feel about ending your personal career?
Ending it?
When you decided you wouldn't continue teaching here.
I enjoyed what I was doing. I thought it was worthwhile.
Earlier, you mentioned something about scholarships with the Agricultural Women's Club. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, that was really what the Agricultural Women's Club did, and the University Women's Club. I mean, that was our goal in life, and that was nice to choose those people and then meet the girls. And were there any guys then? I don't think there were guys then, but I think there were after we turned it over to the university. And it was always pleasant to have our luncheon and meet them and talk with them and hear from them, and made it all worthwhile.
Who were the recipients of these scholarships? What kind of people?
Students from IFAS.
From IFAS. Okay, they had to be in the agriculture field.
Right.
And what was the source of the funds for that scholarship? What was the source of the funding?
Donations from members. We always sought donations, and we got them. Some people were very committed to that. They gave us a fair amount of money, and then we invested our money. We didn't for a long time turn our money over to the university because they required so much money to give a scholarship. You know, they needed money to administer it, and we didn't want to do that. And finally, in later years, we did do that, and were able to establish. Of course, we had Dan York's husband came to our anniversary event, and he said, I want to establish a scholarship for them. So we did that. So we have that one, and then we did several others on our own, and we did one for Deanne. So we're pleased we've done that.
By that time, you were treasurer, so those were funds that you managed.
By that time, what?
You were the treasurer, so you were managing those scholarship funds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And you said investing them, and how did that happen? What was your investing expertise?
I looked for the best interest rates. One time I found a good interest rate, and it had to be snapped up right then or it was going to go away probably. So I called Deanne and I said, well, I just lent you $5,000 of my money to put in our treasury to get that interest rate, and then you have to pay it back to me as soon as you have the money, which happened fairly soon. But she got a big kick out of that, because I kept them going by putting my own money into it.
Do you remember any fundraisers that were held for that purpose?
I don't remember fundraisers with Ag Women. Maybe there were. I don't remember them. Do you remember them?
Do you remember the jewelry? The raffle? We used to have a raffle at the
time. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Marcita used to go and get one of the jewelry stores to give us jewelry. Yes, that worked. Yeah.
You said there were a lot of activities that were planned. Were these for families, or were they the women that were engaged?
They were for families. We went out to a picnic at what's the University Park out there? The little lake?
Lake Waburg.
There probably once a year. and played with the alligators. Well, not really. Try to stay away from the alligators. So we did that. I remember one time I was program chairman, and we went out to Hurlong Museum in the Canopy and took a picnic. That was an interesting day.
What kind of museum was that?
Oh, that old house in Micanopy. It has a bed and breakfast now. I think it still is. I don't know.
And it was a museum, they had some kind of museum, or it was a house tour, or?
Yeah. I probably said museum, but I don't think it was then.
Your home economics background probably had you quite involved in the style shows you talked about for the other organizations. I remember one that the Agricultural Women's Club had, in which we made our own clothes. Were you engaged in that?
Oh, yes. Yes. We had fashion shows. One at the country club, I remember. One time I was out at that one, and I don't think we made money on those. I think we just had them for entertainment. But I was at one of those, and we had, gosh, I'm going to forget what we had. Cold soup. What was it? Chilled cucumber or something. Somebody came rushing in late, and she said, "Oh, I'm late, and my soup is cold." And I said, "Well, it was cold when it started. Isn't it colder than it was then?" Yeah, we had. That's a long time ago, Kathy. You've been talking to people. They all remember those things.
Well, among us, we have pretty good collective memory. Yes. I do remember that you forced me to sew something that I really didn't know. I didn't know much about sewing, so I didn't forget it. It was fun.
Yeah, I decided I was way too old to handle the finances forever, and that you were younger, which you still are, and that you could do that. Look at you now. Look at this career you've made for yourself.
It sounds like you didn't let much grass grow under your feet in Gainesville. You really were well engaged in a lot of things, and that's wonderful.
Yes. I ended up on the hospital boards, and probably from being, I ran the gift shop at the hospital for about 5 years for the auxiliary. That's probably how I ended up on the boards. I don't know. But that was interesting, and then they'd send me to conferences, and that was interesting.
What do you think the impact of the Agricultural Women's Club was on the university and or Gainesville, if any?
What do I think what?
What do you think was the impact of the Agricultural Women's Club on the outside community?
Well, I think it was basically social and for scholarships. I don't think it was more than that. But it certainly impacted those girls that got the scholarships. They would tell their stories, and they really appreciated them, really needed them. Their families were coming, and they were excited about it.
So did you see a lot of change in the club in the years that from the time you came until later?
Well, I did see the decrease in new members because the younger people were not interested, and I've not laughed since, but I've commented since that people, the Red Hat Society was so big, everybody's red hats, and I said, well, now why is that so popular? And our group just kind of faded away. And somebody said, well, they're just social. I said, well, we were just social except for giving the money for scholarships. We didn't do anything much more than that. But I don't know, it was just fashionable to be red hat. Maybe we needed red hats. Who knows?
And you were on this perpetual board, so how did the decision come about to call an end to this more than 100-year-old club?
Well, we just didn't have enough members to go on forever. I mean, we just couldn't do that. You know, it's like University Women's Club is drawing to its close too. Just the passing of time. I remember they used to say one of the first things, early on, well, way before us, the University Women's Club one time took a picnic out to 43rd Street, which is now 43rd Street, to some faculty member's house. And of course, that was way out in the country, which is not right now. And it was way before my time, too. But they did that kind of thing. And the Lake Water picnics were always big draw things for the men. We had an evening program for the men a couple times a year.
Were you part of the 100th anniversary, the centennial?
Oh, yes.
What was that about? What did that consist of?
Well, that was exciting. We went to the university president's house. I'm not sure whether it was still his house then. I don't remember that. And it was a lovely event. And that's where Dan York was not awarded her scholarship, where her husband got the idea. And it was just a lot of excitement. We always used to participate, too, in the University Women's Club Fall Open House. We always had people who poured there and brought food and were involved. I think we still are involved, some of us. Not I. I'm not even allowed out of the village, so I can't do that. It's not quite true. I am allowed out of the village, but just not very far. This quarantining is really amazing, isn't it?
We'll have to talk about that a little bit later on. Yes, very interesting topic. Can you tell me, since you were on the board, a little bit more about the process of how the club came to an end? What did the board have to do, or what were the decisions made?
Well, of course, Liz Shaw was scholarship person forever and ever, as we were all officers forever and ever. And she always did a good job of collecting names, and then we decided she had a committee, decided who would get the scholarships. And as I said, we did that ourselves, and the university didn't do that for all those years. And we had, of course, social chairman who put the luncheons together and the dinners and the evening events and picnics. So we had something every month. Very interesting. Or I thought it was interesting. I had fun.
And how do you think the original founders of this club in 1908 would feel about its demise at this point?
I think they'd be surprised we went on this long, or that long. Yeah, I don't know what they expected in the future. I do know that they joined together to make friends and introduce new people and help their husbands by doing that. And there were a lot of friendships made that way. And of course, after the University Women's Club was established with its own quarters there, it was easy to have events. Before that, we were in that little house. You remember that little house up by the field? And they wanted that for something, so they bought us out by giving us the space at the at the women's club. And what's terrible with that was we couldn't park there very well. Remember that?
Well, I remember the rickety wooden floors. That was different rooms of a little wooden house that a woman had donated to the club. And yes, that was donated to the University Women's Club, not to us.
Field around it. When we moved to the women's club down by the athletic facilities, our parking had to be up by the stadium, and it was a long trek. It was raining, but the officers could get a spot there if we went early enough and got it. That was nice.
So, does anything else come to your mind about your time with the the Agricultural Women's Club? They're so closely intertwined. I think that's probably our memories are mixed.
Well, I know if I heard other people, I'd probably think of tons of things that I don't remember that have slipped my mind that they still remember well.
But you remember them as being enjoyable times.
Oh, yes.
Fondly. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I got to the point I didn't do things unless I enjoyed something about them. I mean, there are so many options of things you can do in your life. You might as well do something that is worthwhile plus interesting.
Indeed. So before we finish, let's go back to what you said about quarantine. In this unusual, extraordinary year, we're all having new experiences, and you're in a special kind of situation that maybe is a little different.
We hope we don't do it again, don't we? Get the fall even.
So where are you, and how are you passing the shelter in place era?
We get our food delivered every day, and we choose from several menus. And almost always those are the menus come, but not always, but almost always. And they've been doing that for months now. And
because where are you living, Mary?
Independent living in an apartment.
In the village, in a senior living community.
Across from Santa Fe. And we have had just in the last week, we've had one associate employee has it, nobody else, and she or he only had contact with a couple of people, so now they're quarantined. Of course, what quarantining means is you're supposed to stay home, in your apartment, but they don't put a sign on your door or a lock or anything, but that's where they want you. And if you leave the grounds, like to go on a vacation, then you're supposed to isolate yourself for 2 weeks till you aren't contagious anymore. But they're doing a wonderful job of taking care of us, and it's amazing, actually. And this food thing is just beyond amazing. But they'd hopefully come out of that in a week or two, and I don't think we're going to. I think we're going to keep wearing masks.
Has your life changed a lot during this period?
Out of that, what?
Has your life changed a lot?
Yeah, it really has. It really has. I do see friends. We meet several of us for lunch down in our lounge in our building and sit way far apart and eat our lunch. So we do talk then. And then in the evening after supper, before supper, we meet out in front of the building and way far apart and talk, maybe 10 of us or so. And we have wonderful programs on our own television here, and they keep us going with crafts and songs, and they try. They do everything they can. I mean, the staff is wonderful. So I think I'm probably pretty lucky to be here. But I never thought I'd live long enough to be taken care of as a special population, as you know. I mean, really. We're the old population that's affected by it. I say, okay, enough of this.
Yes, it's a lot of change. So is there anything else that you'd like to bring up that we haven't talked about, Mary? Either about the current situation or your past memories?
Well, I'd like to bring up that you've been a wonderful replacement treasurer when I needed one badly. So I thank you for that. You got us through to our end, our conclusion. That's good.
Thank you for that. I enjoyed that as well. So, if we think we've remembered what we're going to remember, then I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this oral history.
Although I wasn't excited about doing this, but it was good to remember things. I'd like to see it all. Am I going to see it all sometime?
Oh, definitely. You will have that opportunity very soon. So thanks so much. And I will now end the interview.
Okie doke. Thank you.